Hi everybody, welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. I've been wanting to do this video for a little while, and I'm staying with family, so it's a bit noisy and busy here sometimes. So I've got half an hour, I think, that I might be able to get this video filmed in. So what I wanted to talk about today is another deck that I wish existed. So I've done one video about the deck that I wish existed, which was the one from Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and I ended up actually drawing that deck. This is a deck that I wish existed, which would basically feature the work of Paul Klee, and Paul Klee is one of my favourite artists. I'd say probably my favourite or second favourite artist. I also love Marc Chagall, but I'm not going to talk about Chagall much today. But I do want to talk about Paul Klee. So there's a couple of decks out there featuring Paul Klee's art. So one of them has only 22 arcana. It's not a full deck, and it's by Ibiza Tarot on Amazon. It's selling on Amazon, but I'll talk about it again a bit later. But it doesn't look like I would like a Paul Klee deck to look. And then the other one is on Gamecrafter, and it looks more extensive and more interesting, but it's an oracle. It's not a tarot, I think. And then there's kind of, and it's also quite expensive to ship Gamecrafter decks, so I haven't purchased it, although I probably should, because I do love Klee so much. And then there's other painting tarots out there that kind of feature the work of famous painters, and they're kind of curated decks, and they have 2 or 3 paintings from particular artists, but I haven't seen any that include Paul Klee or Chagall for that matter. If you know of any, I would be very interested to hear about them, because I love both those artists, but they're artists who are often overlooked. So other more famous artists are mentioned and featured, and their art doesn't get included to the same extent. So what I wanted to talk about. So Paul Klee he was a contemporary of painters like Kandinsky and Picasso. He was sort of post-Cubist. He was influenced by Cubism, and that's one of my favourite art movements. And then he moved further into expressionism and abstraction, but he retained a lot of playful joy in his images that I don't really find in other artists' work. And he was extremely prolific. He did many paintings and prints and so on. So it's impossible for me to pick a favourite painting of Paul Klee, but I will kind of put up a few of my favourites with the names of them now. And I'm just going to read a little bit about Klee from this book. This was by Faden. So I've been digging into all the art books at my mum's house. We have a bit of a collection because me and her both did art. And yeah, there's this book by Paul Klee, and then the other book I'm looking at is just this big tome of the story of art, and it has a section on modern art. So I'm going to look at that as well in a minute. But yeah, this one has quite a lot of his paintings in. And I'll put some images up at the side here of some of my favourite paintings while I'm talking. So it says few painters have filled in their own artistic birth certificates with such emphasis and clarity as Paul Klee. He did so in Karounan in Tunisia on 16th of April 1914. On that day, Klee entered in his diary, "Colour possesses me, that is the meaning of this happy hour. Colour and I are one. I am a painter." So before that, he'd been kind of struggling with his artistic identity and sort of finding his style. And colour was really the way he came into his own in his art style. And he was then, it says he was then already 34. He was born on 18th of December 1879 near Bern in Switzerland. He learned to play violin when he was young, and I think that influenced his art. yeah, they talk here about an analogy with music and art. And then his appearance was unusual. And they talk about his exotic appearance. And this is a picture of him. That's Paul Klee, and that is Lily Klee, his wife. So this book, yeah, has quite a number of his images. And yeah, I'll already have put a few up on the screen. I love these kinds of, what's this one called? Hermitage. It's like a garden scene. So beautiful. He puts in all the plants and everything. That one similarly. And this one. Yeah, so he liked painting sort of garden scenes. This one, the red balloon. It's beautiful. So this shows some of his colour, like his emphasis on colour. This is the twittering machine, one of my favourites. This little machine that creates birds twittering, and that's the tightrope walker. Kind of similar. And this is a lithograph. So again, printmaking. So yeah, he worked in various mediums, and you can see the kind of colour theory, the layers of colour that related to each other, and then contrasting colours as well. The way he worked with colour was really interesting. This is gorgeous. This is called Botanical Theatre. Yeah, they're amazing. And then this is another one of my favourites, Pastoral. Looks like a sort of language. This is called Fish Magic. So you see what I mean? The sort of nostalgic, kind of childlike, but then the skill and the use of colour are really very sophisticated. So I'll leave this image because we're going to come back to that one. Anyway, I can't go through all of it, although I would love to. But this book talks about Klee. So yeah, it says here, the Cubist movement continued where Cézanne left off. An increasing number of artists took it for granted that what matters in art is to find new solutions to what are called problems of form. So to these artists, form comes first and the subject second. And the best description of this procedure was given by the Swiss painter and musician Paul Klee, who was a friend of Kandinsky's, but had also been deeply impressed by the experiments of the Cubists, which he got to know in Paris in 1912. To him, these experiments showed not so much the way to new methods of representing reality as to new possibilities of playing with forms. In a lecture at the Bauhaus, and he taught at the Bauhaus, and he was apparently an amazing teacher, Klee tells us how he began by relating lines, shades and colours to each other, adding a stress here, removing a weight there to achieve the feeling of balance or rightness after which every artist strives. So this picture that they show is called A Tiny Tale of a Tiny Dwarf. And it says, we can watch the fairy tale transformation of the gnome. The head of the little man can be seen as the lower part of the larger face on top. And it's unlikely that he thought this out before he began to paint the picture, but the freedom of his play with shapes has then led him to this this kind of creation. So yeah, that is some examples and just like some information about his art. So yeah, why am I talking about Paul Klee and tarot? So basically, at the start of his career, he was quite influenced by the occult and the mysticism revival at the time. So he was into theosophy, Theosophy is a religious movement. It was established in the US, I think, in the late 19th century by a Russian called Helena Blavatsky. And it was based largely on her writings. It draws heavily from older European philosophies such as Neoplatonism, and then also Hinduism and Buddhism. So yeah, it's a sort of new religious movement and a form of occultism which is situated within like the Western esoteric traditions. So he apparently was into that. I haven't found much about that and its influence on him, but he was into color theory. So color theory in art is a set of practical guidelines that help artists understand how colors interact with each other and affect our perception. So it includes things like the color wheel, color relationships, so like contrasting colors. If you put opposing colors from the color wheel next to each other, it increases their impact. And then also color theory includes things like the impact of color on mood and emotion. So he was really into those kind of color theories, and he did quite a lot of teaching around that and developed his ideas while he was working at the Bauhaus, I believe. And yeah, like I think I said the quote already. He said, "Color is the place where our brain and the universe meet." I'm not sure if that's a real quote, but he did later as well. He said, "Color has taken possession of me. I no longer have to chase after it. It has hold of me forever. Color and I are one. I am a painter." So he really thought that color was his that color was the root of painting. Yeah, so I was looking into possible connections between early abstract art and the tarot when I came across a painting by Klee that I hadn't seen before, and it was called The Fool. I think that was the original title. And apparently it's in the Albertina Museum of Vienna. And you can see it, hopefully I'll put it on the screen. So this really reminded me of, the Fool that we see particularly in the Marseille Tarot. And then I started searching and I found some other versions of the Fool that Klee had painted. So there's this one, for example, is called Little Jester in a Trance. And he did several kind of variations on the Fool. And this one I think is really lovely. And just in terms of how it looks next to an actual tarot card. Where's my Fool? There it is. I think there are some similarities in terms of the stance. There's no cat or dog. Not sure what that is. Maybe his bum. But you see what I mean? There is definitely some kind of similarity across those two images, I think. And then he did another one called The Fool as Prophet, which I'll put up on the screen. Quite different. And yeah, this one was called Fool in a Trance, Little Jester in a Trance, or Fool in a Trance. So these are, it's translations from the German. So the translation sometimes puts jester and sometimes puts fool. And then a later one, he did one called Robust Fool, which I'll also put up here. So that is much more abstract. And yeah, as I was looking at these images and thinking about, I thought about why they hadn't been included in the decks that exist of tarot. Paul Klee, included in the tarot. So, for example, the 22 Arcana deck by Ibiza Tarot doesn't use Paul Klee's Fool image in place of the Fool, which seemed a bit strange. But then I was looking into his other paintings, I wondered if he had other paintings relating to these tarot archetypes. And it seems like he did. So I started to look through his catalogue, and he's got around 10,000 works attributed to him, which is absolutely massive. So some of the images that I found had names that link directly to tarot archetypes, and others are a bit more of a stretch. But I just want to show you some of them because I think they would make an absolutely fantastic deck. Yeah, so I'm kind of wondering about the possibility of putting together a clay deck using the images that seem to link to the archetypes. So yeah, I'll just walk you through a few of them. This image that's coming up now is the lovers. So you can see, yeah, the two people there in the image. And yeah, this is called the lovers. And it was from 1920, so it was quite an early picture by Paul Klee. There's a second one called the lover, singular, and this one was quite interesting, I thought, because it seemed to be, so there's a very large sort of moon shape, and it was almost, and there's a figure inside that, and it was almost like a cupid in the moon. So I thought that was quite interesting. It's a darker one of his images. A lot of his images are quite light-hearted, and that one slightly less so. The next image, this one is called Tower in Orange and Green, or the original was the Tour, I think. Yeah, so this is Tower in Orange and Green. So I was thinking about that as a possible tower card image. I mean, I think that's quite interesting. The next that I'm going to put up, this is the Diavolo player, or the Devil player. I thought that one was quite nice for the devil. This is a musician, and there's no people chained or any of the other traditional images, but I think the stance is quite reminiscent of the devil. And the diavolo in this image, I think is a musical instrument. I'm going to double check that and I'll pop it up on the screen. This one here, this is really interesting. So this is the prestidigitator, or conjuring trick, or also known as the magician. And I think this is really interesting. There's a table there with a cup on it. There's a sort of wand, and I think that black in the sky could be understood as a disc. Yeah, I just think this is really, really interesting. And, you know, there are kind of callbacks to childhood toys, as in earlier images from the Marseille. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting image as a magician card. So yeah, prestidigitator, possibly the best word that exists for magician. The next image is Howling Dog. So, you know, a possible moon card there. You've got the moon, you've got the dog on the right, howling, and I think another dog kind of at the top there. And the sort of watery colour at the bottom. So a possible moon card design, I think. This one is called Angel Applicant, and I thought this would be quite interesting as a High Priestess kind of card. Also with the moon above and, you know, the sort of angel wings, which could also be interpreted as a seat behind, or a gateway. So I thought that would be quite interesting as a High Priestess kind of card. So you see, I'm kind of stretching some of these, but I just think there's so much here to work with in terms of a deck that could be drawn from his imagery. This one is called The Great Emperor Rides to War. So either Emperor or possibly Chariot for this. I think that looks kind of a bit like a chariot sort of card. Yeah. The Emperor Rides to War. That was 1920 as well. This is actually Ein Tor. I think maybe even a better tower card than the one I showed earlier. This next one is called Le Jardin Robot, but I think this is quite an emperor-ish kind of image, or even a hierophant, I'm not sure. But I think quite an interesting image there, and yeah, beautiful kind of abstraction, and the colours, the contrasting colours. This next one is called Engel Übervoll. And this is one of his later images. It was when he was already quite ill before he passed away. And this I thought would be an amazing temperance card, with the wings and the sort of hand movements at the front, almost like something is being exchanged between one hand and the other. So I think, you know, this is just obviously a sample of his artworks, but I think quite a lot of them could be seen as very similar kind of archetypal images to those that we see in the major arcana. And I think that's really cool. So yeah, I'm wondering about the possibility of putting together a deck featuring the artwork of Paul Klee. And you know, the one tricky thing might be the minors, because his images are abstract. Oh, look at this one. This is one of my favourites. It's absolutely beautiful. I don't know which way up it is. I think it's that way up. It's like an upside down bird. Wouldn't that make a beautiful Wheel of Fortune? I think that would make a wonderful Wheel of Fortune. It says here, more than a year after the visit to Egypt, visual memories of it can still be detected. And this is one of the last examples of Klee's detailed technique of drawing that defines the form, as he put it, exotopically. That's by shading outside the form and not within it. So his approach to work was beginning to change, moving away from the complexity of method and meaning to pursue more purely pictorial ends. It says we see that the objects on the margin are oriented towards all four sides, so you can kind of look at it from any direction, suggesting that the picture plane is not vertical, but it's actually horizontal. Okay, could be. We're perhaps looking down into a pool in which objects are reflected, or perhaps upwards through the greenish waters of the Nile, which mercifully filter the relentless heat of the sun. Yeah, I love that painting. It's absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, so let me know what you think in the comments. I mean, he's one of those artists who I think is criminally underappreciated, along with Chagall, who, I mean, his paintings would also make an absolutely impressive deck, but I'm not going to cover his work here. But another, you know, same kind of era and really beautiful colours and artwork. Yeah, that would be my wish list for artistic decks. I wish they'd painted them in their lifetimes, but perhaps, you know, if we look at this kind of art and we can see these archetypes in it, then maybe there is a case there. I'm not really into you know, curated decks where we try and match images with archetypes. I don't really buy them very much, but it struck me that so many of his images map onto those archetypes that maybe this might be a case where that kind of thing could work. Definitely for the majors. But then how would you go about the minors? Because yeah, he does these sort of higher level images, these archetypal images. So perhaps they wouldn't work so well for, you know, suits for the number cards. On the other hand, perhaps, you know, you could design a Marseille style pip to go with a major arcana of his images. So that might be another possibility. A clay-inspired set of minor arcana. Yeah, so that's it from me today. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And sorry if it was a bit sort of random. Look at this. Absolutely beautiful. Oh, there was one more in here that I liked. This very final one. This was his last painting. What about that as a magician? As above, so below. This is called the kettle drummer. Or perhaps the, you know, the one eye there. The devil. Or death. Maybe that's the death card. Anyway, I won't go on. But yeah, thank you very much for staying to the end if you're still here, and let me know what you think in the comments. Okay, thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.